Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. Can I thank everybody for being here in the audience? You've got lots of people here today and also participants in the meeting. Can I just read out the obligatory usuals? Fire evacuation procedures for the evening meeting. There aren't any fire alarms scheduled for the evening meeting, therefore if the fire alarm sounds, please can you evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of the room, so please exit through reception at the back here and meet in the War Memorial Park. If we can all meet in the War Memorial Park so they don't disappear, we want to make sure everybody who is here when we count, if there is such a thing, as a fire alarm. In terms of webcasting of the meeting, we are being webcast live on the internet and you'll be able to look at it on YouTube after the meeting if you choose to. In terms of mobile telephones, can I please ask you all to put them on silent or turn them off? Thank you. In terms of the order of business this evening, we're going to slightly rearrange the published agenda. We're going to take the local plan first because we have public speaking on the local plan. Then we will take the community centres paper and finally we will take the motion referred by council. So we'll do all of the public speaking first before we go near the piece of business that doesn't have any public speaking on it. I've got a list of public speakers to go through, but I'll start going through the basics of the agenda first. There are no apologies for absence, the Cabinet are here. In terms of declarations of interest, in relation to the community centres paper, I have a declaration of interest as a non-pecuniary interest because I'm a trustee of the Oakridge Hall for All and therefore I will be leaving the meeting and Councillor Gavin James will be taking over the chairmanship of Cabinet. Councillor James.
Yes, and I have a non-pecuniary interest because I'm the chair of the Hall for All and I will be leaving the meeting too.
Does anybody else have any other declarations of interest in any of the items on the agenda? Somebody needs to stay, yeah, okay. Okay, everybody. There are no urgent matters before us. I have the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of December, Cabinet. Do I have permission to sign those minutes as a true, accurate record of the meeting that we held? Thank you. Okay, everybody, the first substantive item on the agenda then is the Local Plan Regulation 18 consultation. Could I first ask Councillor Konietzko to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to try and do this without coughing too much, so please excuse me. So I'm very pleased to bring forward this evening the latest draft of the local plan update and to ask for approval for this draft to go to public consultation later this month. Restarting the process of updating our local plan has been one of our top priorities as a new administration since we took over the reins of the Borough Council last May. A huge amount of work has gone into the project since then from you, my Cabinet colleagues, members of the EPH committee, some of whom are here this evening, fellow borough councillors from all groups in the chamber, our local town and parish councils, community groups, residents, and of course our team of officers. And a significant amount of progress has been made as a result. So now I believe we're ready to begin full public consultation, known technically as Regulation 18 consultation on the latest draft of the local plan update. I'm sure everybody present has read each and every word of the agenda pack, but just in case you missed out a page or two, it's worth reminding ourselves of the different elements that make up the documents that are going out to public consultation with your approval. Firstly, the housing number. The best advice that we currently have is that central government mandates that we should be building around 830 new homes each year in our borough. As a Cabinet, we believe that this number is too high, but we've been told by our planning officers and two sets of barristers that we don't have the flexibility to lower that number. However, we believe we've got some scope to at least alter the timing of the delivery of those new schemes, which is why we've developed our stepped trajectory accordingly. This will lock in just under 700 new homes per annum for the first 5 years of the new plan, which is almost 20% lower than the government's target. The policies themselves. So with input from a wide range of stakeholders, we've strengthened policies throughout the plan. We're particularly focused on setting higher standards around the issues that residents tell us matter to them. Net zero, water quality and livability. We're proud to be setting stretching but achievable targets for developers and are confident that they'll make a big difference to those who live in the new homes built under the local plan update. The spatial strategy. We've listened to the comments made by councillors and local residents at the EPH meeting in September, and we've removed 3 sites from the spatial strategy that we inherited from the previous administration. Lodge Farm, the land west of Upper Cufford Farm, and Skates Lane. We've also added in the former Portal site in Overton, following consultation with local groups, as well as increase the number of new homes in the town centre. And the infrastructure delivery plan. Our new homes have to be accompanied by significant investment in infrastructure. We called for this many times whilst we were in opposition, and we're sticking by this principle now that we're in Cabinet. The infrastructure delivery plan tries to capture all of this by developing a list of the main infrastructure projects that we're going to need to support all of the new homes we build during the plan period. Now, it's worth me coming back briefly to the housing number, as I suspect it's going to be mentioned at least once or twice this evening by public speakers. As has been explained, the government published its new National Planning Policy Framework just before Christmas. This sets the rules for local authorities like ours as we prepare our local plans. Now, the impact of the new framework on our local plan and our borough isn't as straightforward as some non-experts perhaps have claimed. And there seems to be a consensus emerging in the planning community that the new framework hasn't changed a lot in reality. However, given how much is at stake, it would be negligent of us if we didn't seek further expert guidance. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're not going to score quick political points by undermining our borough's long-term future. Instead, we've asked our planning team, our legal advisors, and even Michael Gove himself to give us greater clarity on how the new rules are going to affect our approach. And crucially, we've asked if the new framework gives us the freedom to set our own housing number. Once we get that guidance, we'll be very happy to provide everyone with an update. And if there's scope for us to reduce the housing number, then we will, of course, look to do so. In the meantime, it's vital that we share our draft local plan with residents and ask for their feedback. This is clearly the right thing to do. After all, the plan does belong to our people, not just to us as councillors. And going to public consultation also gives us much needed additional protection against speculative development. And it stops the developer free-for-all that has been allowed to happen because we lacked a 5-year housing land supply. I can't state the importance of this enough, not least because it's tended to dominate the conversations that we've had with our local town and parish councils when the leader and I have been meeting with them over the past few months. Our borough's housing land supply currently stands at 4.6 years, which is below the 5-year threshold that central government mandates. This means that our planning officers and our Development Control Committee have reduced scope to block unsuitable developments in Basingstoke and Deane. We've seen developers already try their luck and push through schemes that aren't right for our borough because they know that we're fighting with one arm tied behind our backs. We've had to reluctantly grant planning permission in some cases because we lack a 5-year housing land supply. This can now stop. Once Regulation 18 consultation is underway, we only need to demonstrate a 4-year housing land supply to get our full planning powers back. Once this plan goes to consultation, the people of this borough are back in charge, and that's exactly what should be happening. So I'll now hand back over to the leader and listen to public and councillor comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. We've got a number of public speakers this evening, and I'm going to start with Mr. Morris. If you'd like to come forward to the chairs you see in front of you, Mr. Morris. You have a microphone in front of you, and on the left of the microphone, or the right, looking at it, you've got the little face with the speaker. If you press that, the microphone will activate so we can hear you, and you have 2 minutes to share your thoughts with us when you're ready.
Good evening. There have been no significant housing allocations in Tadley over the last 20 years, leading to a population decline over this period compared with the rest of the district, which has seen a 10% increase. This has also resulted in an ageing population, with the over 45s increased by almost 19% and the under 45s declining by 13.4%. The local plan papers recognise that's an appropriate level of services and facilities in Tadley, sufficient to support a reasonable amount of the circa 945 dwellings needed. In fact, current facilities will suffer from further decline in the population, with falling school rolls possibly leading to closures. The borough has an acute need for affordable housing, and the waiting list is increasing daily. In September last year, this Cabinet approved funding for 2 new housing officers to assist the 4,900 families on the waiting list. Councillor Laura James was quoted as saying, "Our priority is doing everything we can to make it easier for people to get on the housing register." This has clearly been effective, as the list now stands at over 5,000. The council now needs to ensure that affordable homes are made available to every part of the district, including Tadley. To reject consideration of any allocation in Tadley due to the DEPZ is disingenuous, as although the zone covers substantial parts of the town, especially in the north, there are reasonable areas to the south which are acceptable, such as Skates Lane. Tadley deserved to be recognised for its importance as the second largest settlement of the district, with significant employers locally who need to attract and maintain quality staff. Simply put, my question to members, is it not worth re-investigating the need for a housing allocation at Tadley to meet the requirements of the town for the local plan period? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris, for your contribution. If you'd like to take your seat. Thank you. Next speaker I have this evening is County Councillor Stephen Reid. You know the microphone, Stephen, and the 2 minutes is yours.
Thank you, Leader. In the local paper, Leader, dated 21st of December, you and the Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning and Infrastructure asked 4 questions of the Secretary of State in an open letter. You asked, and I praise thee, whether he would scrap the standard method for calculating housing numbers, whether he would put the power for determining housing targets back in local hands, whether he would release councils from the 5-year housing land supply rules, and whether he would enable councils to determine whether exceptional circumstances exist. The answer to all these questions turned out to be yes in whole or in part, and we now know that, and this is, I disagree with the introduction that was given, the standard method is now advisory. It is a starting point, it is not a destination, it is not mandated, and that is so important. Housing targets are indeed back in local hands. Councils with up-to-date local plans will no longer have to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and councils were and are able to determine whether they have exceptional circumstances. Now, I'm not here tonight to argue the merits or demerits of the Secretary of State's announcements. I'm here to point out that you have, by your own admissions, drafted a local plan without knowledge of these answers. You have, therefore, by definition, not taken them into account. You have, again, through your own admission, not looked at these important options for slowing down the borough's rate of growth, which is what the people of the borough wanted you to do and what you campaigned for. I suggest, therefore, that it would not only be unwise, but also unsafe to take the next step today to go out to consultation on a plan drafted in ignorance of the facts. My recommendation is that you review your draft plan in the light of the information that you've admitted you did not have, and consider whether you now have scope to reduce the housing numbers for Basingstoke and Deane, saving many greenfields in the process, and start the consultation on the basis of the lower number rather than trying to make a change in flight.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
I've got one final public speaker this evening, which is Mr. David Young from North Waltham Parish Council. Mr. Young, if you'd like to come forward.
Again? Just press the button.
If you press it again, sorry.
That was well done. So I have just a question around the Oakdown warehouses, as I attended the local planning meeting the 26th of September. I think Councillor James was there with Maria Miller, and it was a fact that it was stated at that time that there was no support by the council for the Oakdown farm plans because there was no need, there was no justified need, and actually it would just create more housing demand. But I now see that that's in the local plan, so that would be my question as to what changed between end of September and now.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you for your contribution. Okay, colleagues, I have now got councillors. Can I ask Councillor Rattigan to come forward? Thank you, Ken. You've got the usual time. There you go.
I'm grateful. Firstly, let me do some thanks. Firstly, to the leader for his notable tribute to Marlon Tucker in the Gazette today. I was moved by that. To the team of officers led by Joe Bromley for the efforts they've made to get the papers in front of us tonight, and to the portfolio holder for his willingness to listen during his 7 months as the portfolio holder. I'm grateful for that and the flexibility he has shown to extend his ear. I don't know if you can extend an ear, but he has proved himself to be excellent in his work. But I wish also to voice my disappointment that there are not more councillors who have taken the opportunity to speak tonight. Many people have made much of the fact that this is such an important piece of work. I think it's important we lay down our red lines. People have talked the talk, but obviously are not walking the walk. So I'm disappointed in those who made the thing. I believe in local plans. The fact that I called out the previous administration for delaying the local plan update, I think is clear. And I don't agree with Councillor Reid. Delaying things any longer will only mean that planning by appeal continues, and that is not where we should be, and it's certainly not where you should be putting members of this council in the DC committee, because I think that is appalling. I'm not going to talk about the 2,000 pages and individually, but I do think it is right that we involve ourselves in the consultation through our parish councils, make sure that they understand what is likely to come within the patch. But I also want to point out some of the deficiencies in what is before us, because I did take a bit of time to look through that. Boring weekend, but I've done it. Some of the things are wrong. I represent part of Tadley, and to have no social housing allocation or housing allocation for our second biggest settlement is outrageous. So what you're ending up with is that people in Tadley are going to their Basingstoke where they work and putting themselves on the Basingstoke list. It's just not good enough. And frankly, the death of primary schools, the likelihood is that we should see Tadley thriving. Now, I don't care about which area gets the housing, but it is wrong of you to withdraw what was an allocation previously, and as a mistake. The papers do not give credence to our Gypsy and Traveller population. I have always banged on about this, but it is really important. The fact that the settled community don't like them, the Gypsies and Travellers themselves don't like them, and the new residents of big new settlements don't like them. We need to provide single sites for Gypsies and Travellers which they will feel comfortable in. And I think you've missed an opportunity to do that, and you haven't had the proper consultation with the Gypsy and Traveller community. The A340 is an arterial road with good jobs at either end of it. AWE, we got people earning big money in science. And at the other end, we've got the hospital. 12,000 people work at that hospital. We ought to be mindful of our green credentials. We need to get housing close to where the jobs are, so people don't have to get in a car to transport themselves to that employment. That is the aim of declaring a green emergency. We need self-builds, not to be pepper-potted in big developments, but to have individual sites so as Rebecca's officers don't have to be dragged away to see something, but they can manage the site better. And self-builders will not be among people who have already bought their houses and don't want to live next to a building site. We need to do a lot. I guess I'm out of time, but I promise you that I will write in with the consultation. I will do what I can to improve what is in front of us, and with the work of us together, you all can improve what DC end up having to deal with at the far end of it. So I look forward to the consultation and making this a better local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And finally, on this particular agenda item, Councillor McCormick. Evening, Andy. Welcome. And the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Leader Cabinet. Much of what I had intended to speak about was addressed at the beginning of the meeting. It's one of those things, isn't it? We've been waiting for national policy framework changes, and they get announced on the very day that the Cabinet papers get published, just before Christmas. I would disagree with Councillor Reid's analysis. I see no reason to delay the plan any further. In fact, the changes that have come about as a result of the revisions to the policy framework are probably welcome as far as Basingstoke is concerned, especially the fact that when the consultation starts, we'll be relying on a 4-year supply, which we can demonstrate, and not a 5-year one. So my question really is, when is the consultation going to start? And also, very sorry to see you've received a facial injury there, Council Leader. I note also that Michael Gove had a similar facial injury report in the press today. I hope the two of you haven't been physically fighting.
Let's put it like this. It was an altercation with a kitchen cabinet. Something else entirely, I think. Thank you, Andy, for reminding everybody of that. You are so kind. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Would you like to respond? Yeah, by all means, Andy, go on.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to all of the speakers. I'll sort of go through and sort of address your points in turn. I think the overarching response to all of these is really appreciate your comments, and please do take advantage of the public consultation when it opens to make sure that your views are heard. But if I take each of the speakers in turn, so Andy, thank you for your comments. I agree, we do need more housing in Tadley, but that doesn't mean that we should be building on any site that comes our way. We should be building on the right sites. Skates Lane was taken out for a number of reasons, because there were issues with access and proximity to facilities. There are also concerns about biodiversity and heritage. So whilst I would welcome seeing suggestions and applications for housing in Tadley, it needs to be the right scheme in the right place. Councillor Stephen Reid, thank you again for your comments. I think we could probably argue for hours as to what changes are actually included in the updated National Planning Policy Framework. I'm not a planning lawyer. I suspect you probably aren't too, so I'm going to leave it to the experts to decide this one. So we've asked our KCs for advice, and we've also asked DLUC for their comments, and I will wait until those responses are received before making any changes to the local plan numbers. However, what I would say is that, as you will be well aware, this is the first stage of public consultation. This is Regulation 18 consultation. We've got a whole summer of updates. We've got the Regulation 19 consultation, which will hopefully happen later on this year to update the plan. So if there are changes to numbers, if the government does indeed give us greater flexibility to set the housing number, then we will certainly look at doing so. And just because it's not included in Regulation 18 doesn't mean it can't be included later on, and doesn't mean that Regulation 18 is invalid. And I would absolutely stress that, as some other speakers have already said this evening, and as our numerous conversations with town and parish councils have made clear, residents are concerned about the lack of control that we have in our DC committee. The lack of a 5-year housing land supply is a real worry for them. By starting Regulation 18 consultation, we get that power back, and we're really keen to do that as quickly as possible. David, in response to your question about Oakdown, the Oakdown site was included in the draft spatial strategy that EPH consulted upon in September, and it remains so in this allocation. It's in there because we've had to undertake, required as part of planning policy to undertake something called an economic needs assessment, which looks at how much office and industrial and logistics space we need as a borough in order to support the jobs and other economic activity that arises from the new homes that we're building. That's telling us we need a certain allocation of industrial and logistics facilities, and that's why Oakdown Farm is in there. Obviously, there's a separate planning application happening, which is independent of this local plan, and I don't want to prejudice that by saying much more about that at the moment. Ken, Councillor Reskin, thank you for your comments. We've already spoken about the need for housing in Tadley and the requirement for good sites to come up. In terms of your comment about gypsy and traveller accommodation, we agree. We're undertaking a separate piece of work at the moment, which will be ready in time for the Regulation 19 consultation, which does involve consultants actually speaking to the local gypsy and traveller community and finding exactly what it is that they want to make sure that in the future the pitches that we build are in line with their requirements rather than what we think that they want. Equally, your point about the self-builds, combining them rather than pepper potting them around the developments, that is actually included in the latest draft of the local plan update. I'm conscious that there was quite a lot to read, so you might not have got to that particular bit, but do have a look through that when you get the opportunity. And if you think that needs to be strengthened further, please let us know. And then, Andy, thank you for your support. Really appreciate that. In terms of consultation, assuming we get the green light tonight, we'll be looking at starting Regulation 18 consultation on the 22nd of January. So it's not next Monday, but the Monday after. That will then run for 6 weeks until the beginning of March. So look out for more information on that, assuming we get the green light a little bit later on.
Thank you, Andy. Colleagues, would anybody like to contribute to start the debate? Who's going to go first? Go on, Laura.
Okay. I'd just like to say a really big thank you to Andy for everything you've done. I think it's amazing. You've worked so incredibly hard, but also to the staff team that have been incredible. I mean, they really have. It's an amazing document, and I must say I haven't read it all. I haven't read a lot of it, but not all of it. And it's incredible. I've been involved in it in different stages throughout the process, and it's been a long journey. But I'd just like to say, that you've really worked so hard on this. And I think it's worth mentioning as well the visits that you've had to the parishes. I think that was incredible that you went out and visited all the parishes, and just say well done to that. And I think that went down really well. What I wanted to raise was in relation to social housing, the policy to deliver 60% affordable housing. I think it's a really important policy, and I welcome that. I mean, this week at EPH, Economic Housing and Partnership Planning, we had a paper on the annual monitoring report that referenced that we've only delivered 14 socially rented units last year under the last administration. I mean, that's damning, really, particularly in light of affordable housing that is so out of the reach of so many people, they can't afford it. And it's what's happening with affordable housing. It's making sure that people then are having tied to benefits and then unable to come off. So I think that it's really important that we deliver a large number of social rented. So I welcome that. And I just also wanted a reference in relation to the building design, in relation to the work that you've done on that, and a big thank you for that, and make reference to it. It's page 276 of the report, and in relation to that, I think I just want to pick out a few bits in relation to adequate, safe, easy, accessible storage for prams and pushchairs within flats or within communal areas and the ground floor or on the landings. And, I know that I've banged on about this, so, it's one of my sort of mantras, but I just want to say thank you for that. Also, in relation to balconies and or communal amenities space where the residents of flats can sit and also hang washing. I think that's important. And it goes on. I think there's the one that I want to pick out is also child-friendly windows, balconies, door handles and locks, because it is such a significant issue. So I think that our commitment to livability under the design of buildings it has been delivered, and I'd like to say a really big thank you for what you've done there, and that you've listened and you've delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I also congratulate and thank the portfolio holder, Councillor Konechko, and his officer team. I think it's an outstanding job. It's been a long-term effort, and again, I fully support this draft local plan now. And like us, I'm keen to see it get to public consultation at its Reg 18 stage. Over the last 2 years, I, along with many other committed members, have been endeavouring to make the policies that you see in these documents as robust as can be, to stand up to interrogation at any appeal, and if that's where the future takes us. I am not happy with the amount of housing that Basingstoke is required to take by the government's planning policies. And indeed, the punishment we would see if we do not conform is quite shocking, as we've experienced, and it would be bad to see developers continuing to plan our future and not ourselves. Now, the climate and ecological emergencies, they rightly underpin everything that we do. Our policies throughout this document reflect that for the future of our borough. The emergency is for real, both our emergencies. There are no rehearsals. We've pledged to get this borough to carbon neutral by 2030, producing its own energy by renewable means, facing challenges with water supply, river water quality. Without action, we will continue to lose more of our natural species and our landscape will continue to suffer. So to this end, I welcome the climate change policies, CLC1, to make this borough carbon neutral and adapt to our changing climate. We have produced 14 environmental policies covering both our environment and energy use. We need developers to be on board with our aims, or please go build somewhere else, as Basingstoke does not want you. We've pushed these requirements as far as we think we can. So I truly hope that we are able to convert these fully supported policies and not to be caught up in this current government's backtracking on its climate policies. So I look forward to the results of the consultation. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody? Karen.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Congratulations on Councillor Konechko and indeed yourself for your tour of the borough, to all the leafy places out in the villages and the parish councils to truly engage meaningfully with the people that this will have an impact on. It's always forgotten that I think sometimes with things like the local plan is whatever we build today will still be there in 150, 200 years' time. It's not like a budget or any other policy that you can always change next year. This is making decisions that will long live after we do. So it's important we get them right, and going out to public consultation, there are experts in every street. We could never be. So I'm pleased that we're going out to public consultation. It's a very important part of the process. So I would encourage everyone to look at their own area and share that expertise with us and engage with the consultation to make sure we get a broader section of views as possible. And I think it is important we progress. Some people have made comments around Michael Gove's latest tweaking of the MPPF, and it really not even a tweak, I don't think, in my view. Councillor Reid is absolutely right. You don't have to prove you've got a 5-year land supply as long as you've got an updated local plan, which is very much the reason why we have to update the local plan, because until we do have to have that 5-year land supply, as has been mentioned already. And in terms of exceptional circumstances, apart from the green belt, nothing was mentioned, and despite the fact that previously the previous leader was sent to Michael Gove to have the conversation. Maria Miller brought a petition to full council, sending him again to have a conversation, and indeed we had a motion that asked Maria Miller to speak to him. There was nothing, no mention of Basingstoke. There was, however, and it's quite frightening, a mention of 7 authorities that are not cracking on with their local plan, and a very clear steer that the exceptional circumstances that really apply are if we do not make progress, we will lose all control of planning for this borough's future, and that will go to the inspector. That was made absolutely clear. So I think it's right that we get to this next stage of the process. Someone did mention the Oakdown plans, and I did say that I was always been against the large warehouse they were going to build down in Oakdown. I was not keen on it, but as Councillor Konechko says, we've unfortunately got in a situation, it's not just housing numbers, there is an element of economic land and logistics space, and so we have to think very carefully about where that goes. It was already in there, and we didn't have strong enough evidence to remove it. So it does remain in there without any prejudice of any current planning application. So I apologise if I misled anybody on that. But overall, I think it's a good draft local plan, and I really hope the public engage with it. We need the expertise. in the council we've been talking about it for too long, and it's now time for the public to have their say.
Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else? Kerry.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I know how hard it is going to all these parish councils and town councils, and I've had 5 in my own ward, so I understand. And what I'd like to say is, on a different note, the sport and leisure portfolio that I am in charge of, it's very important to plan for the future, and having a up-to-date local plan is very useful when we are doing that planning. So that's one thing. One thing I was going to say actually is I'm actually going to commend Councillor Rattigan. He's my ward member, and one thing I can say, it's always been a pleasure having a political argument with Councillor Rattigan, because he does it from the heart. He speaks from the heart. We don't agree on a lot of things, but on some things that he said tonight, talking about affordable homes and the fact that schools are suffering, I very much agree. On the fact that, talking about Skates Lane, if our planning system is telling us that we should build in that area, then there's something wrong, because it has special biodiversity there. For me, it should be part of our biodiversity strategy. It should be it should be a wildlife corridor there, and actually it was never recommended in the first place. It snuck in as a site in the previous administration, but like I say, we can have a good debate, and I would say that it's constructive. And some of the other debates had in politics, they're not constructive, and one thing we know here is that we're having a good debate. So thank you, and I hope we can move on, because I think it's the best for the borough that we get this local plan moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Kerry. Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you, Leader. It's been an honour and a privilege to work with this cabinet in great detail on this local plan, and I have been blown away by the competence and brilliance of Councillor Andy Konecki in particular, but actually all of the rest of our team who have worked tirelessly on improving and amending this document. I very much look forward to the public engagement, and very much hope that we get as high an engagement as possible. I think it's essential that we approve it today, because our residents know that it's been a plague on all our houses as a direct result of the previous administration and the failure to deliver sites, which has resulted in us not having a 5-year housing supply, and the nonsense coming out from certain political parties about what we can and cannot do, when we have had explicit advice from very senior KCs. It just demonstrates the dishonesty of the previous administration and the Conservatives in particular, in terms of what we can do and what we can do for the betterment of our borough and for the betterment of our residents. And it's the reason why, as a cabinet, and why the leader and Councillor Andy Konecki are having an incredible reception across our borough, because the residents know honesty when they hear it, and they know when they're being told the truth, and they know when they are listening to people who are genuinely trying to make sure that Basingstoke gets back on track and is no longer planning by appeal, but planning by design and delivering what the residents want, which is competence, intellectual ability, and an understanding of how the actual borough should be run.
Thank you, Annalie. Anybody else? Okay, I've got a few comments I'd like to make just to bring the debate. I think this is a very important moment, because, as Gavin has rightly said, this hands this document over to the public. The residents of our borough now have the opportunity to take part in a consultation on what is the draft local plan. So these are the proposals that we would like to take forward, but we want to hear from people about what their view of them is. It's your chance to influence and shape this. We know that developers will give us their view. We know their barristers will give us their view. But what matters equally as important as any contribution made by anybody is that voice of our residents. And so if there is one message, one singular message to take away tonight, it is please take part in the consultation, engage with this, and guarantee there will be things in this document that you agree with, and there will be things in this document you disagree with. Well, tell us that. Be brave enough to tell us what you agree with and the things that you would perhaps like to push us further on, because that's taking part in the democratic process that this local authority is all about. And I think that really shows the disappointment I have and colleagues have with government on this. We've written to Gove 3 times. We've put to him our MP's questions. We've put to him our own questions. And he hasn't had the decency to actually reply. So it isn't as if we haven't tried to engage with government, it's just they haven't replied to us. And they haven't bothered to give us the answers to the very questions we've asked them on the housing number, or on plan policy, or on the 5-year housing land supply. And that's disappointment. That's disappointing for our residents, particularly for those who have suffered from speculative development for all the years where we have not had a land supply. And let's just be clear about the housing number. For the last 5 years, this council has delivered way past the 850 homes a year that was agreed in the last local plan. The last administration had a local plan that had a housing target of 850 homes in it. But for the last few years, we've had 1,300, 1,500 homes delivered. And as the Minister replied to one of our local MPs, none of that counts. Not a house involved in that calculation will actually count in the context of oversupply or historic supply, in the context of a 50-year question that was put. So we can play semantics here, but the reality is the actual position is that the standard method has not gone anywhere. The top-down housing targets have not gone anywhere. The language has not changed substantively at all from the position that was previous. And the reality is residents need to hear that and have a debate about it. But we want to reduce the housing number. We want localism. We want the power, the local authorities to decide their own housing number. And we think government should deliver on that. I think there's an awful lot of point around delay. If this document is delayed in any way, shape or form from this point forward, we will run the risk of further speculative development, planning by appeal. There isn't a village or parish council or town council we've yet spoken to. We've got quite a few more to go. And North Waltham's on the list, I can guarantee we're coming to talk. But there is not a single one we haven't spoken to where that 5-year housing land supply and speculative development hasn't had an impact. We want planning in the control of our Development Control Committee. And they want the strongest policy framework we can give them. Not a should or a must, or sorry, a should or a could, but a must or a will. We want actual policy that gives development control the ability to control development. And that's really important that this document goes forward so we can begin to have that discussion and get closer to Regulation 19. I think there's 3 things I want to say about the difficult choices about sites and the difficult choices about policy, really. One thing I think we can all agree on is that the quality of what is built in Basingstoke and Dean is really important to us all. Whatever developers come forward with, whatever we see developed, the quality of that is really important to us. The fact that it can meet our climate and ecological priorities is important to us. The fact that we respect our rivers and chalk streams and environment, and that the importance of development's impact on our environment is important. And again, the policy framework is there to be debated and to be discussed. And I hope it's a very big and important step forward when it comes to protecting our natural environment, as much as encouraging development in the places where we can sustain the affordable housing that we've spoken about, particularly socially rented housing, which is critical to what our administration want to deliver. And it is disgusting that 986 homes were built last year and only 14 of them were socially rented houses. Yes, there was affordable rent. Yes, there was shared ownership. But a lot of that was beyond the means of local people in Basingstoke and Dean to afford. And if we want to hold our hands, say 14 socially rented houses, that is shocking. That's a hell of a legacy to inherit. And we are going to determine to dramatically improve on it so that we have a lot more socially rented housing built in our borough. I think it's also that whatever we do has to get past an inspector. We know that a government will send us their inspector to review this plan. So we want it to be as strong as we can make it, with the advice given by our officer team and our advisors to make it as strong a plan as we can to get past the inspector, and it be the right plan for our borough. As Nicholas Ridley used to say, send me your local plans and I shall send you my inspectors. The government still has the whip hand on this, and that's important that we recognise that. They will determine what exceptional circumstances are. They determine what the housing numbers are. But we will do our best to stand by our residents. And this is the very first step on that way. So I really do commend Councillor Konechko and the team, because we all know from being in the administration since May just how much hard work has gone into this. And the team have been brilliant. The entire officer team have been amazing to get it this far. The support team have been absolutely amazing to get it this far. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed to it this far, because it's been a very open and inclusive debate across the council. Everyone's had a chance to have their say to get us this far. Everyone has had a chance to get us there. So why delay now when it would leave us wide open to speculative development? The delay itself that was already 8 months into, by the time we came into administration, had already resulted in not a pronouncement from government, not a murmur from government at all in all that time. So getting on with it now, because we can have a 4-year housing land supply, I think is really important to defend our borough while we debate these very important issues. So yeah, let's think about what we're doing here. The decision this evening is to move to Reg 18 consultation, and I'd like to ask the Cabinet if you approve of that. Andy, would you like to sum up?
Yep. Thank you, Paul. Yes, so I'd like to take this opportunity just to thank everyone again who's spoken this evening, as well as those who have contacted me ahead of this meeting with their comments on the draft plan. I think a special big shout out should go to the Popham Airfield community, who have been bombarding my inbox with dozens of emails over the past week. So if you're watching, thank you for that. Thank you for engaging in the process. I'd encourage you all to use the Regulation 18 consultation, assuming obviously it gets the green light in a few minutes, to have your say and help us to refine our thinking. We're keen for as many people as possible to get involved and let us know what their views are on the draft plan. I mean, that's exactly what public consultation is all about. And it's worth stressing that I do use the phrase draft plan deliberately. There's a lot more work that needs to happen before we get close to a final approved set of documents. So thank you again to everyone who's contributed to the process to date for helping us get this far. I know, and the Cabinet members have already said that this evening, how much time has collectively been invested over the past few years by many people in this room, and a lot who I'm sure are watching online as well. I genuinely believe that the documents now are much stronger than they were, and that's down to the scrutiny and feedback that everybody's provided. And that's why I bring them forward this evening and ask for your consent to begin public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Colleagues, we have a recommendation in front of us to move to Reg 18. Do I have your support on that? We are agreed on that. Thank you. Gavin, would you like to take over the chairmanship of the meeting for the next item, which is the community leases?
Right, moving on to item 7 of the agenda, the council-owned community centres revised lease and service level agreements on page 1927. Thank you, Andy, for that. I'll introduce the paper. We do have one speaker. I think Councillor Watts will be speaking on it. Actually, I'll let people leave first, Gary, so you can hear my dulcet tones. 1927. Yeah, so this is a paper that actually started its journey before we started as a cabinet. Basically what's happened is there's 23 community centres in council ownership. Those have a variety of leases, in some cases none, that have been built up over the years, creating a very complex sort of area to manage. Community centres are a really important asset. They're what gives our communities the space to thrive. They bring communities together. They bring local groups together. They are really, really important to us, and it's been proven even over COVID, when numbers dropped, different activities and events happened in those community centres. So it's really important that we protect those assets and make sure they thrive into the future. And it's going to be very difficult to achieve that when you've got lots of expired leases and confused leases. So the aim of this paper is to put them all on a bit more of a certain footing. We rely on volunteers. It's important those volunteers who become trustees of our community centres are fully understanding what's expected of them, but also the level of support that is available to them. So this is basically being achieved through new leases that will include a service level agreement. That service level agreement means that, that there is some clear instruction, there's a network of support, there's some guarantees around the way we will protect those sites and look at maintain the structure of those sites, and gives a very clear steer for the trustees who we couldn't be able to cope without, to be honest. So really important. I think the flavour of the paper, the most important bit is about supporting community centres to be successful and be available for the community. As an administration, we have no interest in offloading them, getting rid of them or charging for them. They are on a peppercorn rent with slightly different agreements in place for those with bars. That's not going to change. It's about making sure that we be able to track the performance of those centres and know when to step in for support. There are times, most community centres are fantastic most of the time. There are occasions when trustee numbers dwindle, people's time is no longer available, they can't support the centre in the same way. And at the moment, it's very difficult for us as a council to step in, provide the support, or when necessary, look to form a new board of trustees. And what this document does do, it does have, I'd say the first incident when a community centre is in trouble is we'll step in, we'll give it support, we'll give it advice, and we'll help that centre get back to giving the community, protecting the asset for the benefit of the community. Obviously, with any contract service level agreement, there is always an element of how do we get out of this if we don't get the people who are running the centre on board, and obviously that's when the system's failed. So I know some people have contacted me to express concern about rent and things like that. That is a last resort. If all else has failed, if the support hasn't worked, and we are in a position where we do need to say, how do we get this, the current leaseholder to surrender their lease so we can put a new centre in place or engage with the support, it sits there. We have no intention of ever using it. I never want to use it. I never want to see it being used. But we have to have something in there so we can bring it back. The risk is that if a centre trustee doesn't keep the centre running well, we have very limited control about what we do about that. So we're looking to change it so at least we can make sure that asset is brought back to benefiting the community, which is its main purpose. So that's the summary of the paper. I'll hand over to Gary, who's now going to tell us what's wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with it. Thank you, Gavin. I've come to speak to you about Westside Community Centre. As you're probably aware, RAC was identified within the centre during the autumn time. Following that, the library was closed. The operation of the centre was moved to Ridgeway Centre, which is in Buckskin. Luckily, the management of the centre had been amalgamated just a few weeks before, so that was good timing. Other facilities, users of the centre were moved to different facilities within the borough. Some were still running out of the Russell Howard Pavilion at the moment. Obviously, the west side was at 100% capacity, so they took a financial hit. So I'd like to thank the council for supporting him over the last few months in the shortfall. It's very appreciated by the community. Sadly, at the same time, the social club, which is based at the Westside Centre, closed, and this was roughly the same time as the Beacon pub, which is also in Southampton. So the drinking facilities or the social facilities in Southampton took a real hammering in sort of October, November time, and we're feeling the consequences of that. So after that, the Borough Council and the Hampshire County Council commissioned reports on the centre, and the results have come back and they're not particularly good. It's identified structural problems within the buildings when it's in need of urgent repair. It's also recommending maybe a demolition of the site. So this is where you come in as a council. We need to say the Westside Community Centre is the hub of the community, and it's a focal point, and it's essential. And I'm looking for commitment from the council to set up a feasibility study to look at providing a new facility, ideally on the site, but also if it can't be on the site, within the Southampton area, to look at getting some monies for this particular, some revenue for this particular project. I mean, I know the government gave some money for RAC for schools. Maybe we could tap into that. 106 monies, SIL monies, and also like engagement with Sovereign, with the community centre management, councillors. So ideally, I've just come along for a commitment, because it's a real body blow, and Southampton over the last few months has been really taking some hits, and I'd like this council to step up and really support it and get a new community centre up and running. Thank you. That's it.
Well, thank you, Gary, and for raising that. It is a very important issue. As you know, it's a moving piece. To be honest, if I've got an update before you've got an update, then something's wrong. As ward member, I know we've always in the past it's all about cabinet, but actually I think in place of community centres, the ward member should be as informed as the portfolio holder. Obviously, the work is ongoing in terms of demolition is looking like probably the likely option, but replacement is going to be considered. There's some work to do around whether it's in the car park and the car park moves or whatever. That's the logistics, but we will replace the Westside Community Centre in some form, and you'll be consulted throughout along with Stephanie and Tony to make sure that the community voice is heard in shaping what that looks like into the future. And I say I've got commitment not only to replace it, but to make sure that you're fully informed as we go through that journey. Councillor Mackay.
Just like to add my thanks to Councillor Watts for recognising the work the officers have done to temporarily make arrangements to support things in Southam when the unfortunate events came about, and happy to state my commitment to working with officers and with yourselves as the ward councillors to do whatever is necessary to provide a successful community base in Southam. Absolutely understand that that's important, and happy to make a public commitment to doing whatever is possible. Thank you.
Councillor Keep.
Yes, as the cabinet member responsible for regeneration and extensive conversations that we're having together with officers with Sovereign, I'd like also to make a public commitment that, that it will be absolutely discussed with Sovereign as well within a wider context of the regeneration which we've been promised for so long and which is finally going to happen despite the previous administration's complete failure to do anything. So you have a commitment from me as well.
Okay, the only thing we can't commit to is the library, because I've got a feeling Hampshire County Council have never been so pleased to see that they've got an excuse to close it. Okay, members, any comments on the paper? The recommendation is the Cabinet notes the contents of this report, approves the implementation of the new lease and SLA approach. Is everyone happy? Oh, Councillor Cubitt.
So I'd just like to say I think it's an excellent paper. I think it's extremely important, as you say, that those irregularities are regularised, and it couldn't be more important that we note this paper and that it gets done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Is that all agreed? Agreed. Okay, in that case, if you want to get Councillor Laura James, apparently they've been practising for their auditions to be GMTV presenters to replace Phil and Holly. Hopefully that's gone well.
Thank you, Gabby. Brilliant. Just the top page. Right. Thank you, everybody. Last item on the main agenda this evening is the referral of a motion from Council, the reintroduction of support for indoor soft play facilities in Basingstoke and Dean. This motion has come from full council. It's got lots of points on it to consider. Do I have any contributions to start with, just on the basis of what we've heard at council and obviously the actual wording of the motion?
I just want to say, because I'm, as the cabinet member responsible for major projects, we all discussed this motion, but I do want it to be publicly known that we as cabinet have been working extensively on the Aquadrome amongst many other projects tirelessly, and I've been visiting sites around the country that have been recently built to give us ideas of what best practices at the moment, and to assure those that put forward the motion that soft play is absolutely embedded within the offer that we're looking at on the D-bomb that we're considering to put out to tender on the Aquadrome. Thank you.
Thank you, Audley. That's important. It's before the motion arrived, obviously we've been thinking about that in that regard, and that's important, but the motion is before us, and that's for us to consider with officers what the current situation obviously is in the borough, and I think that's an important place to start, isn't it, in terms of any conversation as to what the reality actually is out there. So, colleagues, in terms of taking the motion forward, obviously we've heard what Councillor Cubitt's just said, that it's part of the proposals that we are considering for the future of the Aquadrome, and I'm conscious officers will be able to look at what the current position is in the borough for us to understand the picture better, and then that would be an informed position on which to take anything forward from that stage. And I think that's probably the most logical way of taking this forward, if you would agree. So if we're happy to handle the motion initially in that regard, then at least we know what the baseline is to start working from, if that's okay. Are we agreed on that as a way forward? Thank you, everybody. Okay, that is the end of the agenda this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance at the meeting.